Here we have Nancy Fuller Ginsburg and Steve Kaufman. Nancy grew up in Copake on a farm. She attended the local schools where she made some lifelong friendships, including a number of you. And Steve, starting in 9th grade, she attended a private school in Massachusetts. Nancy now lives in Claverack with her husband David Ginsburg, who is also here, with whom she owns Ginsburg Foods. She is a nationally known chef who hosts the Food Network TV Farmhouse Rules, and serves as a judge on the Food Network Cooking Competition Series, Clash of the Grandmas, Holiday Baking Championship, and Spring Baking Championship. And as I mentioned earlier, Nancy has 6 children and 13 grandchildren. Correct? Okay. Steve Kaufman, next to her, raised and educated in Copake, now lives in New Jersey, but his heart seems to live here.
Sometimes.
For years,
Today.
For years he's worked in the food industry. Steve and his siblings, Jane and Alan, and Jane is here too, and right here, are the children of Lou and Rose Kaufman. Lou was a founder and co-owner of the unfortunately defunct Copake Pharmacy, which was without argument for decades one of the 2 or 3 most important Copake town businesses. Okay. Finally, I should tell you that Steve is working on a memoir, which I, for one, am looking forward to reading when it's done. Okay? So we're delighted that Nancy and Steve had taken time to come here, see their old friends, and share memories of growing up in Copake, and talk to us about their fascinating lives. Okay? So let me start by asking, how and when did your families first come to the U.S. and to Copake? Nancy?
Well, Howard, you have told me that it was the Mayflower that brought some of us here. And you told me that I was related to a lot of people.
Oh!
I think I probably am related to a lot of people. Half of them are in the audience. I'm 13th generation Mayflower. My mother was really into that whole society thing. Me, not so much. I lost Phoebe Tabor and gave up when I was doing the genealogy. Let's see. I think that's where did the Millers come from, Judy?
Where did they come from? Well, they came originally from Germany. They were Muller. I think it was Westphalia.
All right, so that's
changed their name when they came here.
And what year was that?
Oh God, probably 16 something.
1709.
Oh, close.
All right, so right, Fuzzy would know that.
So you do have some relatives.
Yeah, I'm telling you. Wow. All right, so that's when we really came to be in this neck of the woods.
Okay.
1709. How about you?
Steve?
By coincidence, my parents came over also, but not Mayflower, and it was about 300 years later. My father came over from Belarus in 1911 on a ship called the Tsar, which was very ironic because they were just all trying to get away from the Tsar in Russia. And his quick aside that I haven't told either one of you, his father came earlier, he was a tailor, and he sent over tickets for his wife to bring my father and his sister over, and she didn't want to leave the little sterile village, and she kept ignoring him, and he sends one letter: if you're not on the next ship, I'm divorcing you. And they were on the next ship, which happened to be so they came over. It was in 1911. My father came, and first spent time in New York City.
Okay. What kind of work did your folks do?
Well, my parents were farmers, and their parents were farmers, and their parents were farmers. So I'd say that we were a long line of farmers and grocers. My great-grandfather started Copake General Store, and my grandmother and her husband were teachers in Syracuse, and when my great-grandfather could no longer function as well as she had, they came down and ran Copake General Store. And they ran that from probably what did you tell me? Was it 1885? Somewhere in my world I've seen 1885.
Sounds right.
And then they sold the store to Hilke and Arthur Long in 1955. So my father had no interest in the store. He wanted to be a farmer, and he was.
Steve, did you have any retail people in your family? Anybody in the store?
No, my father had a store in, first store was in Brooklyn, and he met my mother there actually. She came in one day. She had another boyfriend. Whoa. I actually met you many years later when I was in a different industry, and said to the man, I said, by the way, you're almost my father. This was in Los Angeles, but he remembered my mother very well. My father's first drugstore, he was a partner out of Fordham Pharmacy School, but the man was schizophrenic, and one day they came in the store and he had committed suicide. So you can imagine a young man, he was buying into the business, he didn't really have much of an interest. He helped the widow sell the store, and with whatever he made from that, he bought a store in northern part of Manhattan called Northern Pharmacy. And I mean, you want me to tell me how they got here? Okay, I'll tell you later.
What, if any, would you say was your family's most notable connection with Copake's early history, which is something I'm a little interested in?
What was their early history?
The house.
The house? The house that was the weed mine house?
That's the one.
Okay, well, I'm thinking early 1700s.
Oh.
Okay, so early 1900s. The house that I grew up in was originally an office, or part of it was an office, so I'm told, that was brought down from the weed mine, which were just across the laneway on the farm. Is that what you wanted me to tell? That's it.
Thank you. Steve. Early history connection?
To the weed mines? No.
No.
And not even to the chain that went across the Hudson.
Oh, this is going to be a difficult day.
Yeah, which I knew nothing about, Howard.
Yeah. Well, my father and mother, if you don't mind me getting a little off, used to take rides from, he was off every other week he had a day off. And they used to take rides to the country, and they go swimming in the rivers and the brooks and the lakes. And one day they drove into Copake and thought it'd be a great idea to have a place out in the country. You know, my father came from a little town in Russia. He always wanted to be outside in a little town. And they found this store, which was a livery stable, part of the original hotel that was across the street from. They came up in 37.
Okay. Where were you born?
I was born in Sharon, Connecticut on March 27th, 1949, where my great aunt, Josephine Everett, who married my uncle Gilbert Tabor, helped found Sharon Hospital with a man by the name of Clark.
Okay. And Steve?
I was born in Great Barrington in 1947, March also. First day of spring of March.
Who delivered you?
Wow, Dr. Bauerheim.
Raise your hand if you're delivered
Yeah,
by Dr.
probably
Bauerheim.
many of the people in the room. Yeah.
I don't know how the rest of us got here without one.
My mother's making this ice cream soda for Claude Bussin, who many of you may remember, when she went into labor. And so they called Doc, and he said, well, have Claude drive you to the hospital. So he drove her to the hospital, and I was born in 1947.
What time?
4:15
AM, PM.
p.m. I don't like early hours.
Tell us about your friends when you were growing up in Copake.
They're here. Marilyn actually was the first one, and Jeannie Waldorf was the second one. And there's Celia Schaffler's brother, Eric, right?
Right.
Fuzzy Miller, of course, Billy McCann, of course, and then feeding Allison Harrington a bottle. Who else? Well, you.
Steve, did you have any friends when you were growing up in Copake?
You know, I'm going to go off a little more, Howard. I'm sorry, I think it's a great story to tell you.
That's okay. I announced that this would last until 6
When I
o'clock.
was coming out of the hospital after 10 days of being there when you're born, it used to be 10 days, and I saw the bill, I found the bill was $125 to care for the baby for 10 days in the hospital. When I was going out, Walter Ashley's mother was going in, and he was born, so he was born 10 days after me. So, but I had no idea who he was, obviously. And one day, shortly before we started school, my mother takes me in our 52 gray, ugly Plymouth down to Ancomdale and takes me to a house and leaves me there. And she said, I'll be back tomorrow. So in her mind, I believe that was the creation of a first play date before I went to school with another boy. I mean, there were girls in town, but not boy. And she left me there. And to this day, Walter and I are still very good friends. He lives in Cooperstown. And to this day, we laugh about it because neither one of us knew each other. We had no idea what we're doing. And the mothers walk away, and we're there for a whole day and a night. and it was the most bizarre thing. And if you think about it, probably good intentions, but we were clueless what we're supposed to be doing. So that was my first friend, and we've been friends for life.
Okay. Did you, question for Nancy, did you have any memorable visitors on the farm?
Memorable
Visitors, yes.
Like my friends? Like my...
Like Aunt Jean.
Oh, Aunt Jean. Well, Judy knows Aunt Jean best of anybody in the house. But my story for Aunt Jean was the fact that she was living with us while she was in high school. And my father had taken all the storm windows off the house, all 24, and put them in the garage. And apparently he had taught Jean, was teaching Jean how to drive, and she put the car in the garage, but she hit the gas pedal rather than the brake, and obliterated 24 storm windows. She was the most unpopular creature on earth that day. And then another story, Lorinda, Marilyn and Judy's sister, and I used to steal Marilyn's bathing suits. She would get new bathing suits, and then she'd go off and probably going to the Orbit or someplace. And so Lorinda and I would sneak in her drawers, get her bathing suit.
And you two were how old at the time?
Golly.
Probably 9.
Yeah, maybe. And I have pictures today of us modeling Marilyn's bathing suits.
Did you know that, Marilyn?
I did not know that.
Is that okay with you, Marilyn?
Today, it wouldn't have been then.
We all know that farmers can be much more self-sufficient in terms of food than other people. How did that play out in your family, Nancy?
Well, you know, we're on the farm, so we had Johnny Dunn, and Johnny Dunn had this massive garden, and then we would freeze everything that was in the garden that we didn't eat in season. And then we had Fred Link, who had the locker. We all remember Fred Link. And
You want to explain the locker? Some people know.
okay, so Fred Link owned the locker. The locker is a frozen food
The community locker.
community
Yeah,
locker,
yeah.
pre-freezers that you go to Sears and buy or someplace. So we would butcher cattle, and that would be like if a heifer didn't get bred, you would take that heifer and put her in Fred Link's freezer.
chef, I think.
Were there any mishaps or problems besides the 24 storm windows that particularly grew out of living on a farm?
There was one night when my father and Aunt Jean had a fight with mashed potatoes and ran around the house. I'm glad I was probably 5 at that time and didn't have to clean the walls and the ceilings and the kitchen.
Was there any problem connected with the smell of manure?
Oh, that would be the day that my mother, the entertainess, the hostess with the mostest, had a dinner party. And Johnny Dunn, who he lived with us, he was my nanny, he went out and spread manure all over the front lawn. And of course my mother came out, "What are you doing?" And too late. Unfortunately, there were other farmers and it was local people and they got over it. It was all right.
For those of you who don't know, we are next door to the little school that a lot of people here attended. And my question is, what are your memories of the little school right here on Empire Road?
Wishing that I could go back down in the cellar and do the turtles, those little exercises we had to do. Do you remember those? Do you, Jeannie, did you go to the little school?
No, I wasn't privileged.
I have memories of Mrs. Wilson playing a piano. That was a big mistake. I thought I wanted to learn how to play the piano. And Mr. Garrison came every Tuesday. I did not want to learn how to play the piano. But that's a memory.
Steve?
Sally
sorry.
Sally, what was Sally's? Hodgkins?
That's
Yeah.
Sally Hodgkins. She was the she had the best plums. Do you remember those plums? Oh my God, I remember those plums. I remember yesterday. That's a memory. Mrs. Walters and teaching us how to write 1,000 times doing these circles and lines. Remember that? That was a memory.
What's your first day?
Oh, my first day there? Tardy. Because Stubb Shattuck, who drove the school bus, forgot to tell me to get off the bus at the middle school. So I went to the big school. Dramatic. Then they had to get a little bus and bring me back. That was no excuse for unaccountability. That's not.
Steve, first day of school.
Well, the base was the drugstore, so my mother would take me everywhere from the drugstore and back there for lunch, but she takes me here, again, like taking me to Walters, says, where am I going? She takes me to this little building next door and leaves. And there's a lot of other kids there. And, you know, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and there's a lot of kids, and one kid comes over and he takes my hand and he bites me. He bit me so hard that I cried for like an hour in school. They couldn't get me to stop crying. His name is Raymond Shook. Anybody know Raymond Shook? And that was my first time I was ever bitten by anything or anyone. And, so they calmed me down and they put ice on me. And I know Raymond probably went in the corner, which we went to a lot. And so the next day I come to school, and in the little school you went to different groups because there were different grades in the same class. And they taught you to lift up your chair a certain way. And if you walk this way, if you happen to fall and trip, your chair will go away from you, won't get hurt if you let go. So I did that and didn't let go, and I fell, and the leg went right into my solar plexus. It was so the first time being bitten, second day, first time having the wind knocked out. And I'm laying there on the floor, figured I'm dying, and there's a kids are around me, and Raymond Chook says,
Get up.
and he was my best friend. So that's how I started the school. It must have worked, I finished it.
The movie theater was a very big, important institution for Copake for many years. How did it figure into your lives, if it did?
I was there all the time because Grammy Carl was the sister of Eddie McIntyre and Ernest McIntyre, who owned the Copake Theater. So we spent every, Friday night probably at the movie theater. And the popcorn was the feature. Do you remember the popcorn?
Yeah, sure do.
That was the best. Yeah.
You had to go outside to get the
Yes, the theater was here, and then there was a little popcorn stand right here. And candy.
Good and plenty.
Yep, the good and plenty's didn't like those. Like that pop
Steve?
with butter.
Well, the movie theater, it wasn't open all year round, but it was a really big part of my father's business in the drugstore, the soda fountain. There were 2 shows, 7 and 9. And the store had what they called the movie rushes. So after the 7 o'clock show, which is at 9, everyone would come in and buy ice cream and sodas, and so they kept the staff there. And then early years, not when I was there, a little kid, but they used to stay open after the 11 o'clock rush. So they had very long days, and the big rushes, it was a big part of their business, stay open for the movie rush. My mother, ironically, was a secretary for a movie distributor in New York City when she met my father. So during the Depression, they always had tickets. They could go to the movies, and we loved it. And we'd always sit in the same seats. It's about halfway down on the left, on the narrow side, always in the same seats. And I can remember finally sitting somewhere else. It was like I'm in a different world. But the theater was just, really a big part of growing up here for all of us.
Oh, it was.
My next question is about the town clock and which has been central to Copake's identity, how it figured into their lives. But first I want to give you a little background. Mike Fallon, who was sitting there in the green shirt, let me scan a letter that was received by the parents of Stephen McIntyre, who was killed in action in Italy in June of 1944. And the letter was really amazing. Initially, when word came that Stephen had lost his life, people didn't know any details. But a fellow soldier of Steve in Pennsylvania wanted to write a letter to Stephen's parents. And he wrote version after version. He couldn't get it right, and he threw it away, and the letter didn't come until a couple of years after Stephen's death. And I'll just tell you very quickly, Stephen was in a communications unit that was laying wire for communications, and he was driving a Jeep with 2 other soldiers in it, and they came to a little bridge, and as they were about to cross the bridge, a German unit opened fire, and one fellow escaped, another one was taken prisoner, and Stephen unfortunately was shot and killed in the Jeep. But this information came, much later. But as a result of Stephen's death, his uncle Eddie McIntyre, owner of the movie theater, started a project to build a commemoration in memory of Stephen and other soldiers from the town who lost their lives. And that's what that clock is about. Okay, thank you, Mike. That was really a terrific find. Okay, Copake's called the land of rural charm. And my question is, what's been your favorite landscape here?
You or me?
You can answer.
Well,
I'll interrupt you later.
okay. My favorite landscape is probably sitting on the hill on my farm. and looking, just looking at that scenic view toward Millerton, toward Copake, across the valley. And we spent a lot of time farming up there and baling hay or chopping corn or whatever it was. And I would either be on a tractor. I think once I drove a tractor. Didn't like that. Big hill. I don't like flat land.
How old were you when you learned to drive a tractor?
I was 8. My father, the hired men were baling hay, and my father needed me to steer the tractor that had the wagon was behind it. And my mother came out of the house screaming, "Jim, don't you let that child on that tractor!" Well, that fell on deaf ears. And off we went, my Massey Ferguson, and drove the tractor. Yeah, but the view, and then another view that I distinctly remember over the years was the tree as you're going to Prairieville. There was a tree that was on that corner, and I just loved that tree every season and had always wanted to take a picture each season and never did it. Yep, and now it's gone. Is it gone? I think it's gone. Yeah.
Thank you. Steve?
Across the street from our house was 2 rises that went up into Tom's Hill. And we spent probably half our lives in Tom's Hill building forts and running around there. But on the top of the rise, you could look west, and a little bit to the right, it was the Boy Scout camp, Camp Wabika, when you could, see what was going on, the activities in the open grounds there. And then we could see all of Grant Langen's fields, and then we could see Ackley, across from Ackley's up on the hill, and you could see all the way to the Catskill Mountains. And up there, the fields were so manicured, the farms were all very prosperous. And it's a view of, looking down at my house, and then all of that beautiful country all around, like you're looking, from your farm, just beautiful country. And the second one was up above the falls, Copake Falls. My father took a photographer up there to take some pictures for the popular the postcards that we used to sell in the store. And from the top of that, you could look down between the Man-Faced Mountain was on one side, and I think maybe A-Lander on the other side. And just gorgeous countryside that been all over the world, and this is still the top beauty of the world.
What would you say, besides the landscapes, are Copake's special qualities from your or from your family's perspectives?
Mine was the auction house.
You've been paid to say that.
I mean, for all the years, and Lolly's too, we would go to those auctions for years. I remember going to those auctions when I was little with my father, when Folger was having, Judy would remember that as well, the livestock auctions there, and then I can't remember who replaced Folger.
Friedman?
Bruns.
Runzie, that's right. And then it was Ed Friedman. And then it was Mike Fallon.
Do you remember when we first met? I do. I was walking into the post office and you said, you're the new auctioneer. My name is Nancy Bruzzi, you're gonna get to know me. And I sure did. And it was great.
Words were never spoken.
It's a Copake memory of mine.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Steve?
my passion.
Half the tools I have in my house today, my father bought at the auction. We were right down the street, and he just loved to go there and buy, all this stuff. And I have this one tool, and my son Ari is here, was building a fire pit. And we had to cut a certain round area out to put the fire pit in. And he's trying to figure out how to do it. And he could do everything else with that. So wait a second, I have a tool. I went up in my garage, and I had one of these old-fashioned cultivators, we called it.
Was it a
And
plow?
It had a plow on it. It had like a blade that would go into the weeds, kill it. And then it had forks to break up the bigger chunks.
Oh, okay.
So I took this down. He said, "What the hell is that, Dad?" I said, "What is it?" I said, "Watch." And that one blade, I could make a perfect circle all the way around where we built the fire pit. And he was amazed by that. Right? All right.
Yeah.
And I still have a lot of tools, and they came from the auction. And when my father bought them, they weren't new. So it's quite a collection.
Do you remember any crime going on in Copake when you were growing up?
I don't.
That's okay.
I don't. Other than my mother getting in trouble a few times, I really don't remember much crime. Do you?
Yeah, a little bit. There wasn't a lot, but I want to say it was in the 50s, maybe in the 60s, Copake had a state police barracks here. It was in
Murray Jenkins' house.
Murray Jenkins' house. And the trooper was assigned, his name was Bob Schneeman.
Schneeman.
And any little crime that was going on, he solved. It was incredible. And I had a bicycle, and I bought 2 new wheels for this bicycle. I never had a new bike, but I could buy parts. So from Montgomery Ward, bought 2 new wheels, put it on. This bike really could fly. And one day, it was gone. And I'm thinking, where's my bike? It's left the garage. And so my father said it was stolen. Reported stolen. We got insurance coverage, and I got a new bike. And a week or 2 later, the trooper shows up, and he said, "I have your bicycle." Now, bicycle, you get a car stolen, so they don't even take information. He found the bicycle. And it had been taken by, there was when I say tenant farm, it wasn't really a tenant farmer to me, like more of a farmer that would just show up seasonally. And Jeannie was in your farm. A guy that was there for just working in the summer. I don't know where he lived, maybe even in the barn. And he used to walk past the house to go to town. And he was the guy that had taken the bike. He painted it, and it was hidden under one of the bridges, twin bridges.
Okay.
And this guy found it.
I wish I found it.
Yeah. But I had to give the bike back or the new bike back. That was it. But, he was solving all little things like that. One time our store was broken into, and he caught the guy, who had broken into the store. Little things like that. And I did some research to find out whatever happened to this guy, because he wasn't here long. And Howard, you can expand on some of the things. I mean, he's been awarded by the President of the United States for someone was holding 11 hostages in a bank, and he just kept going up and up in his career. And he died a few years ago, very, very well decorated, and this was his first job. So that little crime like that.
I think he even mentioned your name in the.
He owed it all to us.
Now, this is probably a useless question because I don't think anything like this would apply to either of you, but did you ever have any physical accidents when you were growing up in Copake?
Physical what?
Physical accidents.
He fell on a chair. And I got bit.
Maybe riding a horse. Maybe riding a horse.
Yeah. Oh well. Yes, I got kicked in the stomach by this buckskin named Astor. Fresh little thing. I survived.
Steve,
We don't talk about horses in my house. I was afraid of them. My mother was run over as a little girl in New York. And Judy would come to my house to play with my sister or the horse. And they put me on the horse and leave. And I would be crying. I'm a lot younger. But they would just leave me alone on this big horse. And to this day, I can't ride
Steve?
Is there something for that? Finish.
Alan. The discus thrower.
Oh.
Did you have a brother who was a discus
I did
thrower?
have a brother, and I still do. In 56, there was a famous Olympian named Al Order, and he won 5 gold medals for throwing the discus. And my brother was, in our, this is really a longer story, I'm going to try to make it short. In our store, a lot of hobbies and careers started by reading the magazines in the store. Charlie Fast got interested in railroad from those magazines. My brother got into electronics, and they were all the sporting magazines. And he was reading about this guy, Al Order, and he had the Olympic world record 4 years in a row. So my brother decided he was going to be an Olympian discus thrower, and he was practicing on the front lawn, but he had a round ball, white ball that he got from the store. And he was trying to throw it over the house, and I kept getting closer and watching, and he's got this spin perfected, and getting closer and closer. And on the last spin, he hit me right smack.
Ouch.
I don't think my nose was ever the same again. Not a terrible injury. I did break his diving glasses as a result of that on purpose.
Cindy Westfall broke this knuckle when I was playing softball.
I thought we weren't going to mention names.